Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nordic Sound Channel. Now, I am planning a larger state of the channel video, but just for right now, I wanted to let you guys know that I've always been a writer, first and foremost. It is what I love to do. It is what drives me to do the work here on this channel, and I never intended to become a video producer, but that is what the vast majority of my work for this channel has become. Recording videos, editing videos, producing videos, and writing has taken the backseat. So in hopes of sort of like balancing this in a way that's sustainable for me and, to keep this going for what I love to do, this is going to be the last monthly video of Nordic music reviews, but I'm 100% going to be continuing it in a written format. Now, the trade-off is, while videos are a lot easier for many of us, and the upside for me is it does really help my presence here on YouTube, what's more important is that if I cut down on the time I spend recording, producing, and editing videos of reviews, that has already opened up so much more time for me to put that same effort into interviews, which I think we've all been missing lately. I took a few months off from doing interviews just because I just stretched myself too thin. So I'm sorry if you guys love these monthly videos, but they will be continuing on the Patreon as a sort of newsletter, a monthly journal, with a free, anyone can read it version that's likely going to be on Medium. So anyway, I'm going to be doing a larger video on that to sort of talk about the channel, where it is, how it got here, and where I'm going forward with it to keep it sustainable for myself as a full-time grad student who also wants to see this Nordic Sound project continue. And cutting in here while I'm editing, I realized I forgot to mention that as of this video being live on YouTube, if you head on over to Patreon, the very first written edition of the Nordic Sound Journal, which is, among other things, also where you will find the new written reviews, is over for free on Patreon as a sort of sample introductory test drive of sorts for this new written format. So head on over there right now so you can sort of see for yourself the comparison between the written reviews and everything else that's included in the journal compared to what you find in these videos. So go head on over to patreon.com/Nordic Sound Channel and check out that free introductory issue to see if that might be something you are interested in supporting and subscribing to on Patreon. Then also, of course, I've hopefully proven that while this channel is in its iteration stage, it is also incredibly open and receptive to feedback, dare I say dependent on feedback. So if there were any of you watching or listening to this right now who heard that the video is going away and it's going to be written reviews, and you recoiled and you really hate that idea, let me know. If there's enough of feedback on that you really want the videos to stay, I really don't want to read music reviews, but I still want them anyway, let me know, and I will keep that in mind going forward and try and find some compromise or some common area as to where I can continue album reviews in a video format in some capacity. So let me know. I really want to hear feedback on this. Because it's hard to know what you guys are thinking when I'm just sitting here talking to a camera by myself. So without further ado, let's save that for a later time, and let's get into this month-ish in Nordic music, because February was pretty stocked. Let's get into it. As I said, February was a pretty stacked month, so let's kick it off with Torulf's new album, Ristningar I Gnungagap. This one has been highly anticipated from me ever since I had Torulf on the channel with Nils Erdstrom of Hindarfjell last year. I've just really been captivated by this guy's music. He has an ear for tones and soundscapes in a way that has always deeply impressed me. And his latest installment, Ristningar I Gnungagap, is no exception and puts his talents as a composer and as like if you want to use a literal translation, tone artist in every sense of the word. So of the album, Torulf writes, Rysningar I Ginnungagap is an evocative journey that brings the listener to the realm of Ginnungagap in Nordic mythology, a vast space where elemental forces in which all creation was born. Each song is a chapter in a story of awakening, overcoming trials, and catharsis. The title means engravings in the yawning void and delves into themes of making your mark, inspired by the Bronze Age petroglyphs of ancient Scandinavia into Ginnungagap itself. So Rysningar I Ginnungagap is a sonic journey in the best sense of the phrase, the kind that wraps you up in sound and whisks you off into the narrative and sound world that the composer has made for us, prodding and provoking your imagination the whole way through. And of course, it's inspired by the same Tanum petroglyphs that this channel's logo is inspired by. You all know that I am a sucker for petroglyphs, so this album is really awesome if you're looking for ambient, something more on the ambient side. But there's still very interesting music going on in that ambiance. This is the album for you. Well done here, Torulf. I really love this album. So next up, we're going to be talking about something a little bit more traditional. And this is a duo from Germany that has sort of come out of nowhere for me, but has very quickly become a favorite of mine. I've got to talk to you guys about Akleja, a Scandi folk-inspired duo from Germany. First off, this duo features primarily my favorite coupling of traditional folk instruments, Regina Kunkel on the nyckelharpa and Björn Kedel on the cittern, though they also incorporate guitar too. But that combination between the nyckelharpa and the cittern has just always been a favorite of mine, is why I also love Hezelius Hedin. So now I'm just going to show you guys the cover for the new album, and hopefully it will make it obvious why it was sort of love at first sight for me. Their music is very nature wilderness inspired, but with a particular conceptual focus with this album on the little creatures that we overlook in everyday life that are living their small lives right beneath our feet or right above our heads without us even noticing. If any of you have ever played Unravel, that Swedish video game about the little yarn guy who goes on an adventure through the Swedish countryside, giving you sort of like a nano perspective on Swedish landscapes, I could not think of a better visual parallel to Akleja's music. So it's just great. Now, I've primarily talked about the concept so far, but I need to make it very clear to you guys that their music is just as incredible, charming, and comforting as the concepts they're trying to communicate. A lot of bands can rely a little too much on the theme or aesthetic or concept that they're working with and forget that the music has to be good too. That is not the case here with Akleja. The music definitely delivers on the promise that the concept gives us. The interplay between the nyckelharpa and the accompanying instruments is so smooth and warm, and the music here just puts a smile on your face from the beginning of the album to the end. And with spring right around the corner here, you might be able to hear the little house finches and robins and towhees in the background of this video. It is the window's cracked a little bit. I don't know if that's coming through, but with spring right around the corner, I literally could not have asked for an album to better fit the time of year. But what really stands out to me here on this album is the love for the music that I hear coming loud and clear through every track. It's so obvious just from listening that both in Akleja are just so passionate for the music that they make. And it makes all the difference for the listener. We can hear that coming through. Even if we can't register the energy and the vibes we're hearing is from the passion for the music, it definitely makes a difference. So well done here, Akleja. This album, In Verborgenen, is just so delightful. It's so wonderful, and thank you guys so much for this album. I'm going to be listening to it quite a bit as spring wakes up around here in Colorado. So next up, we've got Tvinna, Two Wings of Embers. Tvinna's latest singles were all bangers. I made that pretty clear in my reviews last month. So I had no doubt in my mind that Two Wings of Embers was going to be a solid album to keep in my rotation. I couldn't help but think of Baroness and Late Opeth as I was listening to this album, as that is definitely the style and the sound palette that I hear most clearly throughout these tracks. I know some people are like, oh, Late Opeth, boo. No, I love proggy Opeth, I love Baroness, I love my prog. And so to hear this prog sound palette with pagan themes, bringing prog to pagan music, I think is a really good move. It's really strong, it's very interesting. There are a lot of new cool ideas that you hear when you sort of mix those two together. So with this strong pagan flavor and the prog sound palette, Tvinna very clearly has their own sound identity. You know, you can sort of pick that out as Tvinna's sound. The drum work, the riffs, the vocal lines are all strong points of this album for me, and that could not be more clearly heard than in the track, I'm going to butcher this, Irvahen. Next up, we have a relatively new artist who has been very hard at work, Aegir, the Nine Worlds. Aegir is an up-and-coming artist from Wales who's been putting a lot of time and dedication into his craft, and I just want to highlight his new album, The Nine Worlds, for you guys. He's kind of just getting started out, up-and-coming, but I see a lot of promise in this guy, and I hope that you guys give his album a listen. It's actually quite similar to Torulf's music, especially the new album, in the sense that there's a focus on atmosphere and sound palette, as Aegir, above all, calls this a cinematic soundtrack for the Nine Worlds. For those of you looking for anything on the more ambient, almost dungeon synth side of things, or music just for atmosphere, please check out Aegir's The Nine Worlds. And then the last album I have for you guys from this month is Jonna Hinton's Songs and Callings. So as I told you guys in last month's review, Jonna Hinton came out of nowhere for me, but I have been utterly enchanted by her use of kulning and her ethereal voice, which is on full display throughout this album. And what I really love about this is it's not often that those outside of Nordic folk circles get to regularly hear kulning or lok, this traditional style of primarily herd girls from the traditional music and culture of Norway and Sweden. So an album like this, I think, is really significant in that it is introducing this vocal style through By Norse Records to a wider audience that otherwise might not have a lot of opportunities to hear this style of music outside of the one-off videos that very much it's more of a focus on the visual, like the countryside and someone singing, and instead this is sort of putting the music on the full display without that visual component that most people find it can get a little saucy on YouTube. So Jonna Hinton has done something pretty cool here, I think, by giving a wider audience a way to listen to kulning or lok as it is. So the album is pretty short, technically on the EP side of the spectrum, so it's a quick jaunt through this style if you want to get to know her. My favorite track would have to be her haunting take on Sweden's national anthem, Du gamla, du fria. So with the albums out of the way, let's move into singles, which were actually some of the beefier numbers of this month. Let's kick it off with my personal favorite, Tyr with Axes. So I finally get to talk about some new Tyr for my first time since starting this channel, which is pretty crazy to think about. A little background in that case, Tyr has always had a very special place in my heart, and it was amazing to get to see them at Midgardsblot this year for the first time. And as with many of you, their By the Light of the Northern Star and Lay of Thrym have been staples in my listening rotation pretty much since I first listened to them. I also love their most recent albums, Valkyria and Hell, particularly the tracks Garmr and The Blood of Heroes. But the only thing that keeps me from listening to them more regularly, and this is something very many of the listeners on this channel are going to call from a mile away, is the actual production of the albums. For songs with such heavy riffs and epic anthems and lyrics and themes, the actual production has always sounded a little thin to me, which is literally the only criticism I can come up with this band's whole discography, is just the production. So with that context, imagine me and Alyssa, my wife, sitting around on a lazy day, and I see Tyr put out a new single called Axes. She gives me an excited nod and put it on. So I hook up the phone to my sound system, my fingers hovering over the play button. Thoughts are racing through my mind. Is this finally going to be it? A Tyr banger that's actually going to kick me in the chest with beefy production. Nothing would make me happier than turning on the speaker and having a thick mix punch my teeth in. Finally hit the play button, and goddamn it, it is everything I wanted. The song itself is epic. It's got all the elements you want from a Tyr song and even some new stuff in there, and you can hear and feel every layer of the mix breathe with a full and rich low end within just moments of this within just the starting moments of this single. I was already craving the rest of the album because it's what I wanted. More Tyr of what we love, but with a thick, heavy mix. So I could not be more excited for the upcoming album. Tyr, Awesome job, cannot wait for the album, and my offer still stands to have you guys on the channel. Would love to talk to some Faroe Islanders. Next up, we've got a single from Kati Rán titled Stone Pillars. Now, I'd be shocked if that many of you here are not familiar with Kati Rán, a Dutch musician who's been very involved in the Nordic dark folk scene, particularly her managerial role with Heilung's famous Lifa ceremony from Castlefest. But she herself also makes really dope music, and since we haven't gotten a full-length album from her since 2015, I'm really stoked to see what she's been cooking up. And if Stone Pillars is anything to show for it, we are all in for a real treat this year. I mean, she has Pat Gudmundsson and his stone harp on this track. This is a guy that I've been following for a while who, if you want to think of a marimba or a xylophone, he made one out of stones that he hits, and it's amazing. He's a stonemason that made this instrument, and it's just like, it's amazing. So when she posted on Instagram that she was working with him, I was blown away that such an incredibly esoteric Icelandic stone sculptor who plays music on this stone marimba of sorts would be working with Kati Rán. But the credits are even further stacked with collaborators here such as Galsvird, Umbra, Yanni Pehu, Napalm Death. This album is just stacked wall to wall. But this track, though, is awesome. It's 7 or 8 minutes. It's great to listen to all the way through. It's a nice, hefty appetizer for what's to come. So great job with this track, Kati. Really looking forward to the album. Next up, we have yet another single from Lindy-Fay and De Farne, Low Water. So Lindy-Fay and De Farne are back with yet another single leading up to their impending album, Islet or Islet. I'm not entirely sure what pronunciation we're going to go with there. Low Water continues what we heard with Whisper, pretty much. This unapologetic rebirth of like this retro indie pop-tronica type thing. But this time with a notable flavor of The National. For those of you who spent any time listening to music in the 2010s, this track really brought me back. I loved The National. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, it's just like this incredibly melancholic, ambient. It's like shoegaze, I think would be the best thing to call it. But anyway, they sort of like took the indie scene by storm in the early 2010s. But I haven't thought of them since like 2015. Listening to this track, I was brought back to just the sheer amount of time me and my friends and my brother spent listening to The National together. So if you love The National, you're gonna love this track. And I love seeing Lindy-Fay and De Farne sort of explore this music style that I feel like a lot of us might have sort of forgotten about a little bit over the years. So the melancholy on this track, as I've sort of just teased, is really strong. And I love the synth riff that ties the tracks together under Lindy-Fay's haunting voice. But the featuring of the nyckelharpa really sells the coastal maritime vibe present in the theme of the singles and the album itself. The nyckelharpa has always, to me, evoked the sound of a rocky shoreline. So when it kicked in about halfway through the track, it brought me a big smile on my face, knowing like, oh, they're really selling this islet theme. So this album is really shaping up to be a beast, something that it's going to be different and new in a really awesome way. It's gonna shake up the typical sound that I listen to. So with this single in particular probably being my favorite from the duo yet in their entire discography. So lastly for you guys, I have Korpiklaani's new single Aita and even Saunan. So Korpiklaani, I love you guys so much. You are one of the very few folk metal bands that seem to understand that folk music is also about the energy that is unique to being in a folk music space when the drinks have been flowing. So Korpiklaani has always had this very special place in my heart as a folk metal band that also remembers to bring the energy, the very unique energy of folk music into their music as well. Not just the instruments, not just the tunes, but the actual atmosphere of being around folk music. So with that in mind, as soon as I heard that accordion, I felt deeply at peace. It has been 3 years since a full Korpiklaani album, after all. And with Aita and Saunan giving us our first taste of the upcoming Rankarumpu in April, it really can't come soon enough. The songwriting on these tunes is top-notch, and that energy is back fuller than ever. You can just tell these guys have so much fun with what they do, and that's what keeps me coming back to listening to them time and time again. And so guys, with that wraps up what may very well be my last monthly this month in Nordic music album reviews. As I asked at the beginning, leave me your feedback, what you would like to see in terms of album reviews if you really need these to stay in a video format. Otherwise, they will be moving into print format, which opens up the channel for way more interviews, which is really what I want this YouTube channel to be for. Because after all, journalism isn't journalism if I'm not including voices from the musicians I'm talking about, right? So thank you guys so much for your support as always. I promise I am in the process of doing that video on what to expect going forward, the sort of state of the channel address. So with that in mind, thank you guys for your support. Thanks for sticking around, and see you on the other side.